Dr Megan Woods.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and I would like to take a call and, in the time-honoured tradition, talk specifically to the title of this bill, because the title that the government have given this, the Environment Canterbury Transitional Governance Arrangements Bill, just seems a little bit absurd, Mr Chairman. We are now debating whether we should have bespoke governance arrangements in place for Canterbury for 9 years. And the government thinks this is a transitional arrangement. Now, where I come from, nearly a decade is into transition. We call that semi-permanent, if not permanent. So, Mr Chairman, I think the continued denial of democracy would be a better title for this bill rather than the Transitional Governance Arrangements Bill. I think 9 years is not a transition would be another alternative title that we could give this. 9 long years, that could be another alternative title that we could give this bill. But in all seriousness, Mr Chairman, I wouldn't like to be flippant about this because this is very serious, that actually this is just an affront to people, that they have had their votes taken away from them for 9 years. The fact that there is now a different model of democracy that operates in Canterbury. And Mr Chairman, I think as people who are democratically elected, for us to be saying that things can be a little bit democratic is frightening. That we are democratically elected members of this House that should be the very people that stand up for democracy, and not just say that it's okay for a minister to appoint people to govern a region and make it different than other parts of the country. But not only does the minister have the power to appoint, the minister has the power to remove, and you weaken the appeal rights contained in the bill. This is a truly frightening piece of government, that this is being enacted by any Parliament. And Mr Speaker, we will continue our opposition to this arrangement after the passage of this bill. I have a member's bill in my name that will be staying in the ballot. The name of that bill, the title of that bill, is the Restoration of Democracy in Canterbury Bill. And I'm fingers crossed every time we have a bill, a ballot of members' bills, that gets drawn, that we could return to fully democratic elections in Canterbury. Because, Mr Chairman, to call this a transitional government arrangement bill is just not fair. I think another title that the government could go back to is the Canterbury Experimentation Part 3 bill, because that is what is being done to the people of Canterbury. When the government can't get across its own RMA reforms because they can't get the support of their coalition partners, they think, oh, I know, let's see if we can try it out in Canterbury. They won't mind. So that's where we have it. We have the suspension, we have a whole lot of bespoke provisions in here that make us different than the rest of the country. We have traversed many of these through the course of this committee stage, Mr Speaker, Mr Chairman, and I would not like to traverse those again in this. But to say that this is some kind of transitional arrangement is just not something that any elected member should be able to stand up and say with any level of credibility. And maybe that is why we are not hearing from the government Canterbury members. Maybe that's why they're content to sit there to vote away the full democratic rights of their fellow Cantabrians and sit there and not utter a word. And Mr Speaker, I imagine there's a number of people that elected those members to this House who are truly disappointed that their elected members are willing to sit silent as democracy is watered down by those members. Mr Speaker, it is not good enough. To call this a transitional arrangement is not good enough. The government has not made the case for why Canterbury should be treated any different. It's dressed it up in a raft of different measures. It's tried to say that it's about our regeneration in Christchurch, yet we see that none of the things that would actually help our city regenerate are covered off in this bill. This is a bill purely and simply about the government needing to push across the line its irrigation agenda, and it's about water in Canterbury. It should be called the Canterbury Water Bill. Or it should alternatively be called We've Run Out of Ideas. Because, Mr Speaker, this is a bill that belongs in the 20th century, and it is not a piece of legislation that is fit for our future as a region. Stripping away people's right to vote, imposing a bias towards a particular mode of land use. All these things are not what belong in the Canterbury of the 21st century. It is a disappointing piece of legislation, and it is disappointing that government members are voting for it.
Jenny Sage.